Cheers, guys. Well, welcome back to the second episode of the VR show. I'm still your host, Epyx. And guys, I've talked about the layoff last week. I said lots of the questions that people may have were answered in the live stream. But with that said, I just had to say this little bit about coming back after the 6-month layoff. And that is simply that there was a lot of trepidation. And it didn't have to do with being rusty. I knew that would be the case, that I'll continue to be rusty for a bit. As we move forward, the rust is going to pry loose on its own. What I wasn't sure about was the reaction from you guys. Those of you who I felt I let down, the quality of the show suffering because I became obsessed about statistics really in a non-organic way. Had I remembered what the channel was always about for me, and that was fun and the feeling of sitting down and chatting with friends, a lot of the stats probably would have taken care of themselves in the positive way that I was hoping, but didn't because I didn't, if that makes any sense. I'm not going to harp on it. In fact, that right there, guys, is the final nail in that coffin. We are going to move forward with the show. I'm so excited. And with that said, guys, let's get started. And it's time for VR Roundup. Sony's August VR sale is here, guys, and it contains a big old batch of VR gaming goodness discounts. So if you purchased a PSVR unit between now and the last winter holidays, but you've wanted to wait for sales before purchasing new games, now is your opportunity. For example, Arizona Sunshine, Blasters of the Universe, and Star Trek Bridge Crew, all 30% off, at least another 17 games available at various double-digit discounts. Better prices are had for those with PlayStation Plus membership. Now, you can still get stuff at around 30% off, but even better if you've got the PlayStation Plus membership. So check that out. And then, if you've been wishing for a Sea of Thieves style game for VR, then, well, you need to keep waiting a bit. However, if you enjoy pirates and are okay with non-multiplayer VR experience, you may want to give Furious Seas a chance on Steam. It's available for Rift, Vive, and mixed reality. It's still in early access, but it is very playable despite this and costs just over $20 US. Now, normally I'm wary of mentioning early access games for obvious reasons, and we'll touch on that in today's rant at the end of the show, but this game has been garnering positive reviews and makes for a very fun VR experience. And then horror games, which can be a fun introduction to VR. Okay, let me clarify. Horror games can be a fun introduction to VR for we, the spectators, as it is about one of the most entertaining social aspects of VR. Laughing at others' misery, which in this case is delivered to us via shrieks of horror. Now, if you're looking for a PlayStation Plus membership, then between August 7th and October 2nd, you can get the normally $20 horror game Here They Lie for free. So that's plenty of time to check it out, finish the game, and even if you don't like it, well, have given you the opportunity to play it for free. So if it's something you've been contemplating, I personally have PS Plus membership. For me, I find it's a good deal because it extends to stuff beyond just virtual reality. Having those VR games from time to time, just an added bonus. On the gaming front, Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, available now with VR functionality via Steam for both Vive and Rift. The game was released to some acclaim last summer by developer Ninja Theory, and it is a great example of the Unreal Engine's graphical prowess. Most of who have played the VR version of the game say it is a great descent into madness, but one that comes with limited replayability, i.e., once done, you're not likely to get much more out of the title. And still on the gaming front, Seeking Dawn, a sci-fi shooter adventure from devs Multiverse Entertainment. It launched last month but didn't quite hit on all cylinders, arriving for both Vive and Rift to mixed reviews, mostly because the game launched with quite a few bugs and performance/stability issues. Now, fortunately, unlike some other projects, the devs have been very communicative and have made it very clear that they are going to work hard to fix these issues. Now, they've also indicated a timeline for release onto the PlayStation VR. They hope it will launch for PlayStation VR this December. In the meantime, you can grab it for Vive and Rift. Now, the game has some similarities to Robinson the Journey, but an even greater focus on survival adventure and, of course, the biggest bonus, multiplayer component. All right, let's dive into some VR games and experiences for the past week. First up, Skyrim VR. Now, this was the title I mentioned that dragged me back into VR by the short and curlies. I just want to quickly show you guys not how to add mods. Those videos are pretty much a dime a dozen. That ship sailed many, many months ago when everybody was talking about how it wasn't officially supported, mods that is, but could be made to unofficially work. We won't touch that. Rather, let's get into the types of mods that can make Skyrim so much more enjoyable. For example, guys, there's a massive variety of mods out there. And if you're not familiar with mods, if this is something you've never really done, highly, highly, highly recommend you do some dabbling. Like I said, there's plenty of videos that show you how to add mods, so we won't rehash that here. It's the type of mods and the type of experiences that you can expect that I'll talk about. For example, the variety again. You've got adventure mods. These are mods that add content to the game. Some of them are short, sure, just a few hours here and there. Others are like full-blown DLC releases. They come with 20, 30, 40 additional hours of questing, voiceover content, items, NPCs, you name it, just a massive broad category. Yes, there are some terrible adventure mods out there, but for all those terrible ones, there's the occasional real gem, and we're going to look at a few of those. There's also interface mods, mods that impact the rules of the game, graphical mods, companion mods, etc. So with that said, guys, let's take a look. Skyrim with mods, for those of you who've never tried modding a game, it's not limited to just aesthetics, right? Cosmetics. Yes, there are games where that is kind of the main focus of modding. Slight tweaks to the game. That's never been the case for the Elder Scrolls series. Modding in the Elder Scrolls series has always been about providing end users, those who enjoy modding, with essentially the complete tool set that the developers themselves used to create the game. Now, obviously not the exact tool set, but very, very close in terms of functionality. This allows for broad, sweeping changes to the game. Now, most have rules, self-imposed, community-imposed, keep things within lore, etc., maintain canon. Sure, there's ridiculous mods out there that break all the rules, but usually not the type that I'm interested in. I like adventure mods, slight interface tweak mods, mods that enhance the rule set in a way to make it more challenging, changes to the combat spell system, and of course, graphical overhauls. So let's take a look. So this is the Nexus Mod Manager. Yes, there's other tools out there. This is the one I've been using the longest, and I know there's ways to make this more straightforward, but I don't use the amount of mods that I've typically used in the past, so it hasn't been a huge issue for me. Let's start off just the plugins. Plugins are mods essentially that have deeper more impactful type changes, just in summary. That's not an exact science, but let's go with that. So as you can see here, I've got quite a few additional check marks than what you would see with a non-modded game. I've got Lanterns of Skyrim. The key with some of these mods is the changes appear subtle. They appear to not be that significant, but the impact they have on the game is huge. We're going to get to one that for me is probably the biggest example of that. Lantern certainly isn't, but it's still a great mod to have because it really accentuates the divide between civilization and what's not civilized in Skyrim. And it's just fantastic for that. Roadways, for example, the farther off the beaten path you go, the less lanterns abound. Then we've got Legacy of the Dragonborn. This is an extensive DLC scaled quest mod, and what that basically means is it's as big as some of the official DLC. It adds a bunch of stuff. You get additional quests that in this mod center around a personal museum of yours in Solitude. It's got new voiceovers, hundreds of new items, a new guild, tons of quests. Fallscar, same thing. This is another adventure mod, 20 plus hours, including, again, voice-over content. That's huge because probably one of the biggest negatives for me with Skyrim is the fact that, there's only a handful of voices for male and a handful for female. Then we've got Helgen Reborn, yet another adventure mod. You'll see, it's not on this list. Oh yeah, there it is. It's a little bit down. We've also got Notice Board. Notice Board just takes the AI Radiant quests that normally NPCs provide in the game, and essentially they're almost like roguelike, randomly generated or procedurally generated quests. Except it tidies them up, places them on a notice board, generally in towns outside taverns and inns, etc. Immersive weapons and armor, as the name implies, just adds a bunch of stuff. Skyrim is also fantastic for its ability to provide you with followers. So this is one that I enjoy, Sophia. She tends to be pretty good AI-wise, not getting in the way, etc., as some followers have in the past. There's the combat enhancement, Wildcat. This one here, guys, is the one I want to talk about. We're going to get to the graphical overhaul in a second, but this one right here, we're going to take a look at it as we actually load up some game content, and I want to show you the difference. That's all this mod does, is it doubles the existing tree size. That's it. Period. But the impact of that, it just can't be understated. It is massive. It dramatically changes how the game feels, how it plays because of how it feels, and even just the aesthetics of certain towns like Riverwood, for example. That is a town, as the name implies, by a river, in the woods. Well, they didn't feel like deep woods with the previous trees. With the doubling, holy Hannah, do they ever. So here's an example of the tree doubling mod. Riverwood, as the name implies, is a town that's nestled in this mountain valley right along the banks of a river and a dense forest. Here's the forest with simply bigger trees. I mean, look at this. They're not California redwood big, but they are easily British Columbia temperate rainforest Douglas fir big. These are massive, massive trees. And because of the doubling in size, the canopy is that much thicker and that much higher in the sky. So everything has a more dense look and really just looks more like you would picture forest in the north looking. Because remember, these are civilized areas. This isn't the tundra in the far north. This is well within the geographical tree line. Okay, and here we are with that mod disabled. Look at that pathetic tiny tree. It's just such a jarring difference. And as we pan to the right, again, the difference is massive. It doesn't feel like a forest, doesn't look like a forest. It just looks like second growth in a clear cut, right? A place that had been clear cut, within the last decade or so. Not a dense forest. Certainly not a forest worthy of giving Riverwood its name. You can see the textures, everything else with the flora and fauna. Look at the degree of diversity here. We've got these little plants on the ground. We've got brown, various golden shades of fern, green, vines on the sides of buildings. The texture mod itself, as I pointed out, you just have to look at the ground. It just looks fantastic. Rocks look better and more realistic. Everything just looks fantastic. I'm sitting down right now where I'd be a bit taller, but there's the Sophia follower mod. Trade with her, have her wait here, follow other instructions. It's just a great series of mods. And keep in mind, I added all that adventure stuff. So in addition to the base, dozens of hours of gameplay in vanilla Skyrim, I've got another 50, 60, 70 hours injected through the mods. Which just means, and it gives me that feeling like if I'm going into a desolated area, that new content could be in there somewhere. As she talks a lot. Okay. Let's move away from Sophia a bit. So there you have it, guys. Now let's just take a look at some of the mods. I'm going to go to the immersion changes. You can see there's a couple there. Wench's Citizens Overhaul. But the big one, and that's coming up, is graphical. If I can find it here. There it is. Under models and textures, the 2017 textures, which are 4K diffuse, 2K, 1K normal maps. Again, massive change to how the game is. And because the engine is so old, even cranking up the textures doesn't really kill the performance. I'm still running just fine, no reprojection with all of these mods on and these graphical changes. Now, the last bit to throw in there, it's a small DLL, and it provides for 3D audio, and I'm going to put the link in the description to this week's episode, which basically gives you positional sound. So stuff no longer sounds fake in Skyrim VR. You can actually positionally have audio is cued, basically. So if somebody's speaking behind you, it sounds like it's behind you, to your left, to your right, up above, etc. Again, fantastic, small, tiny mod that wields massive impact in terms of your end result. So there you have it, guys. That is Skyrim in terms of the mods that I like to use. Let me know what you use. Is there anything that I've missed that you would recommend? Love to hear from you guys. All right, let's slow things down a little bit, guys. Get into a little bit of VR vlogging. Let's talk about some of the things happening in the world of virtual reality this week, starting with reports about the death of VR, greatly exaggerated, I may add, that I ranted about last week. I realized when I ranted about it, I didn't really give evidence of why I thought the genie was out of the bottle. Rather, I talked about non-gaming things, but why I don't think it's all doom and gloom on the gaming/experience side of the equation. Well, here's some examples to counter that. First up, we have QuiVR, or QuiVR, however you want to call it. It's a bow and arrow game. It was released in 2016, and it's a title that has a lot of replayability. Yes, it has wave-based elements to it, but it's also a success story for VR. So again, this was a game that was launched in 2016 by a single programmer, Jonathan Shanker, working with a business partner. And what's amazing about the title is not that it was a quality product, but that the quality product was picked up on by the masses. In fact, selling 35,000 copies in the space of 2 years. Now, if you're comparing that to AAA titles, yeah, not massively impressive. But we got to remember, this is an economy of scale. And in virtual reality, we have way less hardware circulating in terms of Rifts, Vives, PlayStation VRs. So with that taken into account, 35,000 is still a significant chunk of units to push. And again, that's in 2 years. That's for QuiVR. So 35,000 titles, $20 a pop. It's about 700,000. After you take Valve's cut out of the equation, which is roughly 30%, well, you're still left with a pretty damn nice figure of almost $500,000 US. Not a bad payday for, well, a few weeks, months work taken over the course of 2 years. Yeah, it's about $250,000 salary per year. Yes, of course, there's taxes and a lot of other costs that go. But I stressed at the beginning, this was a one-person operation, or rather a one-person operation with a business partner. Even split 2 ways, though, not too bad. Now, as successful as QuiVR has been, there's a title that's done even better. That title, Beat Saber by Hyperbolic Entertainment. There's no denying that QuiVR for an indie virtual reality title was extremely successful. But there's a game that was even more successful. The title, Beat Saber. The developer, Hyperbolic Magnetism. Not only did they eclipse the 35,000 in sales with a figure of 50,000, but they moved those 50,000 units in 1 week. 1 week. Talk about a nice chunk of units sold up front. Now, to date, they're over the 100,000 mark. So yes, the sales slowed down significantly, but still, again, 100,000 units for devices that, really measure in the hundreds of thousands to low millions. That's not a bad percentage. And yet another example, a recent one, because we're talking about just the last few months that Beat Saber was released in, and very successful in 2018. Yeah, it's not going anywhere. Now, what probably no doubt helped Beat Saber is the fact that it's very quick to pick up. Skill-wise, it doesn't have a steep learning curve, yet rewards you with continuous improvement. You can start out and be absolutely terrible, but within minutes, you're improving, you're getting better. Minutes turn into hours, and hours quickly turn into days when you're playing Beat Saber. And that's part of the fun. Not only is it a game that's quick to pick up, it's something that a group of friends, buddies hanging out, can play together. Now, that just ups the ante of fun considerably. Likewise, because of that, it's something that benefits from word-of-mouth advertising. Have you tried Beat Saber? No, what's Beat Saber? And so forth. It benefits heavily from word-of-mouth marketing because it doesn't have that kind of niche appeal of, something like an Elite Dangerous, which learning curve-wise is significantly more difficult to pick up and get started in. For a lot of people, that upfront intimidation with a game like Elite Dangerous or, a racing game, it's just too steep and they avoid it. And likewise, it does the opposite in that it doesn't benefit so much from word-of-mouth marketing. Next topic I want to talk about, virtual reality arcades. If you watch the channel for a while, you'll know I've done 2 interviews with a local virtual reality arcade here in the Halifax area called Halifax VR. They moved from a 1-station location to a new location that looks absolutely fantastic. They've got 2 stations set up. They're pretty much booked solid 7 days a week. Now, I've been entertaining, and I throw this out to you guys, the concept of doing something like that here in my man cave. It would kind of be more by appointment, and it would be a little bit more upscale, not in a snobby type of way or arrogant type of way, just that it's not a commercial storefront per se, but more a book some time and have a more in-depth go at virtual reality. So not that pulpy quick VR arcade experience, but a bit more embrace the technology overall. So with that said, one of the things that I was kind of dabbling with is the thought of possibly having a lower rate for those people who agree to be on camera. The idea being they would sign a disclaimer, have a pre-experience interview, we go through the selection process, film it, so all the fun, the terror, whatever happens during that, and then a post-experience or game interview afterwards. Hear from the people firsthand. It's one of those things we talk about so much. On this channel, we've done that in general, on forums and threads. Wait till you try VR, you never know until. But we rarely hear about actual firsthand accounts. So super stoked about that. That's going to start taking place in about 2-3 weeks. I'm still getting things ready. I want the retractable carabiners and all the ceiling mount stuff. That's going to be taken care of within the next few weeks. And to start, it'll just be weekend bookings. And then hopefully get them appearing in standalone videos on this channel because they won't require as much editing. And yeah, be able to share that with you guys, what it's like, almost kind of like reality show a little bit, but for VR. So let me know what you guys think of that, if it's something that you'd like to see, or pass on Epyx. Either way, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Now, still on the topic of VR arcades, and to tie it back to the previous topic that we talked about when we mentioned Beat Saber, the game, the company behind Beat Saber wants to expand into virtual reality arcade. So they've developed an arcade version, and part of the marketing and rollout of this to the world's various virtual reality arcades, they're going to hold a tournament. And it's going to be held in about 50 VR arcades around the world. Cash prizes, physical prizes up for grabs. A company called Virtual Athletic League is going to be hosting it. They've done similar types of VR hosted events in the past, so they certainly have the experience with it. Definitely a story I'm going to be keeping an eye on here. Well, guys, here we are, that time in the episode where we do the VR rant. Now, I mentioned last week, they're not always going to be negative. There's going to be positive ones in between, neither, etc. And then I didn't follow my own advice. And with all the negativity swirling around my life outside of YouTube, I didn't listen to my gut instinct. And I went ahead and filmed some negative attempts at a rant. Well, I got to about take 37, even wore the same shirt to create the illusion that it was part of the same set of takes. Of course, that's ridiculous because here I am 2 days later and the video's still not up. But regardless, I kiboshed it after, like I said, about the mid-30s in takes and figured, you know what, let's be a little bit more optimistic. Let's counter that negativity with some of the things I love best and most about virtual reality. One of those is VR tourism. Google Earth, a fantastic app. We'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to talk about the catalyst for this rant, and that is a product by a company called MI Tech for short. They're marine imaging technology. They've created a camera called the Hydrus VR. This thing is pretty cool looking, weighs about 75 pounds, but it's been designed so that it's weight neutral within the buoyancy of salt water. And I would imagine even more buoyant in a place like the Dead Sea in Israel. But with that said, this thing allows for 8K underwater footage. I've included the link in the description below. Have a look at this, guys. And keep in mind, you can check this out via an HMD. That is what I would recommend most. Barring that, if you're watching and you haven't taken the plunge for VR yet, just use the arrow keys to simulate the 360 degree. It's absolutely breathtaking. And it got me thinking, not just about some of the other VR tourism apps that are out there like Google Earth, which is absolutely amazing. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, you're new to VR, do yourself a favor, and you don't have to be a geography nut. You can be a geography noob. You don't even have to like traveling, right? Stick to things in your immediate vicinity. Check out your childhood home, the places you grew up. Maybe it's the high school or the elementary schools that you went to. Go check those out. Because with Google Earth, you have this ability to fly over the landscape, and you can do it in a couple of different modes. Properly scaled as it would be actually flying over the terrain is my personal favorite. It gives everything a much more realistic look versus having it scaled, which is the other option, or unscaled. Now, once you get to where you're going, most places have the ability for street view. Initially, that was, of course, major urban centers, your New Yorks of the world, Toronto, my city, old city of Vancouver, etc. But many years later now, a lot of the smaller cities and towns have street view footage. In fact, I saw a Google car just the other day here on the outskirts of Halifax, where I live, grabbing footage. So check it out. Go explore. And if you do like traveling, wow, it is amazing. You can spend 30 minutes, let's just say, doing an accelerated flyby of the Caribbean. You could go to the Hawaiian Islands and do the same. Check out the beaches, scout areas that you're thinking of traveling to ahead of time. It is such a powerful experience in Google Earth. It's just hard to describe, in much the same way as trying to describe VR to somebody who hasn't tried it, which we all know is challenging. Now, with Hydrus, it brings the frontier into the water. True, it's not mapped, but expect those types of services to increase. Maybe it's underwater areas off the coast of Greece, for example, with some older Minoan settlements that are now lost to the Mediterranean, having cameras embedded in places like that so that you and I can explore them. Fantastic. And what about outer space? Astronomy, easily another one of my favorite hobbies. In fact, I'm saving up for a telescope right now. If you're curious, a 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain is kind of what I'm targeting, one of Celestron's, but I've had Meade in the past as well. In fact, if you've never looked at the night sky, provided you're in an area where you have that ability, because a lot of the big urban centers, you're just drowned out by way too much artificial light. Seeing Jupiter or Saturn for the first time with even a good pair of astronomical binoculars, a non-crappy department store telescope like a 4-inch refractor, Dobsonians, Newtonians, whatever, it is awe-inspiring. Jupiter with its red spot and the 4 larger moons looking like stars that you actually see in orbit around Jupiter. Looking at a globular star cluster, for example, with a pair of binoculars. Holy crap. Imagine guys, VR tech transferring into space. And it's going to happen. At first, it might be a little gimmicky, like Musk's car that's orbiting, where we can log in and we can see what it looks like to orbit the Earth. The problem is it, tumbles and stuff. It's not perfectly in the right type of orbit. ISS? Hell, let's put a camera onto that people can use to have that feeling like we're actually in outer space. Future probes, I have no doubt, Mars and beyond, we're going to have that ability to not just see the pictures, but experience things in as real time as possible, given the delay, obviously, the speed of the radio waves transmitting back to Earth. That would just be fantastic. And some of the futuristic sci-fi initiatives, the Starshot initiatives, where we send these laser-powered small little probes. Imagine having technology within those that if we can get them to star systems in the nearby neighborhood, granted it would be a 20, 30-year trip at the speeds that they have planned, to be able to see another system with our own eyes. Just absolutely amazing. So much potential, guys. Let me know if you think I missed anything. Underwater, the tourism, the historical aspects we've talked about, just so much outside of gaming. That's why I wanted to touch on it and kind of end things off on an optimistic note. Well, guys, if you liked the video, please consider slapping the like button. Likewise, if you didn't, leave a comment below. It can be anything. The comments, as I mentioned, guys, on that first video, absolutely fantastic. It really helped push that first video, which I appreciate. And sharing it with those that you think might be interested in VR. Guys, apologies for being a little late on this video. It's gonna get streamlined, I promise you. But with that said, have a fantastic one. It's a long weekend for myself here on the East Coast. As always, guys, have a great week. Cheers.